At my 18th birthday party, held right there in the cabin my grandparents left me, I quietly completed the transfer of their entire multi-million-dollar estate into an irrevocable trust just to stay protected. The party was lively, everyone raising glasses and laughing like life was perfect. While they celebrated my future, I slipped away for a moment, pulled out my phone, and pressed confirm on the digital signature that secured everything down. The cabin, the land, and the accounts. My name is Autumn Henderson, and that single click made me the sole trustee. There was no turning back. I had spent weeks preparing for it with the lawyer my grandparents trusted, waiting only for the day I turned 18 to make it official. The doubts had been growing for months, but I stayed silent. The next morning, while the mountain fog still covered the valleys, I heard tires crunching across the gravel outside. A moving truck arrived, followed by my parents and younger brother, stepping out with confident smiles and a thick stack of papers in hand. "We've already worked everything out," my father announced confidently. "This house belongs to us now." They immediately began directing the movers like they owned the property already, telling me to pack my belongings before the day ended. That was when they looked up at the wide porch and noticed the man in the suit standing beside a sheriff's deputy, calmly holding an official folder and waiting. If you've ever had family try to take something that belonged to you or had to protect what mattered from the people closest to you, share your story in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if stories about setting boundaries and handling toxic family dynamics connect with you, subscribe for more like this. You won't want to miss what happens next. When I was 14, everything changed because of one letter that arrived in the mail. It came from a prestigious high school in Knoxville, offering me a full scholarship based on my grades and test scores. One of those merit-based programs that completely covered tuition for top students across Tennessee. I still remember running home from school that day, holding the envelope tightly while my heart raced with excitement. This felt like my way out, proof that hard work truly mattered, despite everything. I rushed through the front door and showed it to my parents immediately. My mother glanced at it for a second, gave a quick, "That's nice, honey," then returned to the phone call she was having. My father nodded and muttered, "Good job," but his attention was already back on the television where highlights from Sawyer's latest football game were playing. Within minutes, the conversation completely shifted. Sawyer had gotten into a fight at school earlier that week. It wasn't anything serious, just a disagreement with another kid during recess that turned physical. He ended up suspended for several days. Instead of being punished, the entire house revolved around him. My parents spent the week meeting with the principal, insisting it was self-defense, hiring a private tutor to help him catch up, and even arranging a small gathering with his teammates to improve his mood. They kept talking about how unfair the suspension was, how the other boys started it, and how Sawyer needed support during such a difficult time. I sat quietly at dinner, listening to all of it, while my scholarship letter remained forgotten on the counter. Nobody planned a celebration for me. No special dinner, no congratulations beyond a few passing words. Eventually, I framed the acceptance letter myself and hung it in my room where it stayed, as a quiet reminder that achievements like mine were expected, not celebrated. That moment stayed with me. I realized my successes faded into the background, while Sawyer's mistakes became the center of attention, demanding everyone's focus. The second major moment happened the following year when Sawyer was 15. He was riding his bike around the neighborhood, showing off to his friends on one of those expensive models my parents had bought him after a strong football season. While trying to impress everyone, he crashed into a neighbor's parked car. The damage wasn't terrible, a scratched fender and dented door, but repairs could easily have cost thousands. I expected consequences. After all, when I was younger and accidentally knocked over an old family vase while cleaning, one my mother treasured from her childhood, I was grounded for weeks and given a long lecture about responsibility. But with Sawyer, things were different. My parents rushed to the neighbor's house, apologized repeatedly, and immediately wrote a check to cover the repairs. Then, without hesitation, they took Sawyer to the bike shop and upgraded him to an even better model, saying he deserved something safer and more reliable after the incident. They described it as teaching him responsibility and how to make things right, but to me, it felt more like rewarding reckless behavior. Sawyer came home smiling, proudly showing off the new bike, while my father laughed and said, "Boys will be boys." No grounding, no punishment, no loss of privileges, only more support. That situation made everything clear. I wasn't simply overlooked. I was held to a completely different standard, expected to stay perfect and independent, while Sawyer's flaws were excused, softened, and sometimes even rewarded. It pushed me into a role I never chose, the responsible one who handled problems quietly, managed disappointment alone, and never caused conflict because asking for fairness never changed anything. These moments weren't isolated. They shaped the way I moved through life afterward. I stopped sharing my accomplishments, buried my feelings deeper, and learned to rely only on myself. The unfairness never made me angry at Sawyer personally. He was just a kid benefiting from the system our parents created. But it did make me question what family really meant when support only moved in one direction. Looking back now, those experiences changed everything. They taught me early that expecting fairness at home was pointless, and if I wanted security or recognition, I would have to build it for myself somewhere else. The cabin in the Smoky Mountains became my real refuge while growing up. Those weekend drives from Knoxville, about 90 minutes along winding roads through the foothills, always felt like entering another world. The noise of the city slowly disappeared, replaced by wind through the pine trees and the crunch of gravel beneath the tires as we drove up the long path. Many afternoons were spent working beside my grandfather, Lloyd Henderson. He always found something around the property needing attention, like sections of the porch roof sagging after years of snow and rain. We'd collect tools from his organized shed, climb the ladder together, and replace damaged boards or patch-worn shingles. As he got older, he moved more slowly, but he never lost his precision. He showed me how to cut angles properly and seal seams tightly against the mountain weather. Working side by side, covered in sweat and sawdust, he shared practical lessons, not lectures, just observations about doing things correctly the first time to avoid bigger problems later. His quiet nod whenever a repair held firm gave me a stronger sense of accomplishment than any report card ever had. Other days focused on preparing firewood. Grandfather operated the chainsaw, cutting fallen trees into sections before we moved to the splitting block behind the cabin. He demonstrated the proper swing, how to shift weight forward, and where to strike the grain for the cleanest break. I'd take my turn afterward, muscles aching after hours of stacking split logs neatly beneath the overhang to dry properly. Breaks meant cold water from the hand pump and quiet conversations about the forest. How some trees grew stronger in poor soil, or memories of storms that once knocked down entire ridges. Those moments built strength in me beyond the physical work itself, teaching patience, resilience, and consistency. Evenings felt different indoors with my grandmother, Ruby Henderson. Her kitchen was the heart of the cabin, always filled with the smell of food simmering on the wood stove. She'd pull out ingredients for her famous venison stew, meat from hunts grandfather still managed when his health allowed, along with vegetables from the garden she had cared for over decades. I chopped onions while she browned the meat in lard, both of us laughing while tears streamed from the strong smell. Then came the carrots, potatoes, and herbs wrapped carefully in cheesecloth for easy removal later. The stew simmered slowly for hours, filling the cabin with warmth that pushed away the cold mountain air. We ate at the old oak table with steaming bowls and fresh bread baked that same morning, soaking up the rich broth. During those meals, grandmother shared stories about meeting grandfather during wartime and how they built the cabin board by board while balancing factory jobs during the week. Her gentle questions about my life always encouraged me to open up about things I never discussed at home, making me feel genuinely heard. As their health declined, my role in their lives became bigger. Trips to nearby towns for doctor appointments turned into longer stays, helping with daily tasks that became more difficult over time. Carrying groceries up the steep path, reading letters aloud when eyesight faded, and staying beside them during hospital visits. They showed appreciation in quiet ways: a squeeze of the hand, an extra slice of pie, small gestures that made it clear my presence mattered to them. One conversation changed everything permanently. Grandfather sat in his old armchair beside the stone fireplace one fall evening, the flames burning low, while grandmother had already gone to bed. We sat in comfortable silence until he finally spoke. "I've seen how Gary handles money," he said calmly while staring into the fire. "And Victor too, always chasing ideas that fail, piling up debt for things that lose value quickly." He paused while the fire crackled between us. "Your grandmother and I discussed this many times. That's why the cabin, the land, and everything we saved are going to you. We know you'll take care of it responsibly and protect what matters instead of wasting it." Then he said something that stayed with me long afterward. Family isn't always about who deserves something. Some people simply aren't meant to hold on to certain things. It wasn't said with anger. It sounded more like an honest conclusion from a man who had spent his life being careful and practical. But those words stayed with me, especially after remembering comments my father had made before about property values and possible sales. That was the moment doubt quietly settled in, changing the way I viewed every casual conversation my family had about the cabin afterward. Their health declined rapidly after that. Grandmother slipped on ice one winter, and complications developed quickly despite treatment. Grandfather passed not long afterward, his heart giving out as though he couldn't continue without her. The funeral was small and personal, held at a church overlooking the ridges they loved. Most attendees were longtime neighbors and distant relatives sharing memories about meals, storms, and the ways my grandparents had helped others over the years. Afterward, the attorney formally read the will in a quiet office, confirming that everything had been left to me: the cabin, the wooded acres, and the modest but stable investments they had spent decades building. That was when the full weight of it settled on me. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was trust. A deliberate decision placed entirely in my hands. Standing outside afterward with the mountains hidden beneath heavy mist, I understood how important it was to protect what they built from any threat, expected or not. Soon afterward, news spread through local reports and online discussions about major tourism growth planned for the Smoky Mountains area. There was constant talk about expanded lodging, better roads, and new attractions to support the millions visiting Sevier County every year. Property values around places like Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge were climbing quickly, with land selling faster and at higher prices than before. The excitement reached my family too, changing the way they spoke about the cabin. Visits from Knoxville, about an hour away along those winding roads, suddenly became more frequent. My parents started showing up without notice on weekends, claiming they wanted to organize leftover belongings or help manage the property. Victor appeared most often. His construction business had failed a few years earlier, leaving him buried under loans and credit card debt that kept growing. He would park his truck near the clearing, walk the property lines with a measuring tape, and quietly talk to himself about acreage and mountain views. One afternoon, he sat on the porch steps sketching rough ideas into a notebook. "This place has real potential," he said while pointing toward the wooded slopes. "With all the new projects happening nearby, land like this could be worth a fortune if sold at the right time." He pushed the idea of listing it quickly, claiming the market wouldn't stay strong forever. "Think about the family," he added. "Splitting the money could help everyone. Pay debts, build savings, maybe even help Sawyer with college." My father repeated similar points during later visits, mentioning maintenance costs, roof repairs, and property taxes on the expanded land. "It's a huge responsibility for one person," he said, repeating Victor's argument about sharing the financial burden. My mother joined in over coffee one morning, talking about how useful the money could be for renovations back in Knoxville or for a family vacation they had delayed for years. She tried to make it sound practical rather than greedy, but every conversation kept returning to the same thing: how much money they could gain by selling instead of keeping it. Sawyer became excited too, already imagining a new truck and football equipment, openly asking whether selling the property meant he could upgrade his ride sooner. Visit after visit, The conversations always circled back to timing the sale perfectly, while demand from tourists and developers remained high. I listened quietly without arguing, noticing how discussions rarely focused on memories connected to the cabin anymore. Instead, they centered on appraisals, real estate contacts, and future profits. Victor claimed he could arrange. Care slowly turned into calculation, and concern became convenience. Victor's pressure kept growing. He would send messages during the week about opportunities disappearing or forward articles discussing regional growth. One time, he even brought printed reports of comparable property sales, highlighting prices far beyond what the land had been worth when my grandparents first purchased it decades earlier. By then, my parents fully supported him, openly discussing how the money would be divided right in front of me. Assuming I already agreed. Sawyer joined the conversations too, talking excitedly about using his share for custom wheels or a flashy down payment once he reached driving age. Everything became clear during one family outing to walk the property boundaries. Victor paced across sections of land, estimating value per acre based on recent sales he had researched. Father nodded while mentally calculating totals, and Mother worried aloud about waiting too long and missing the market peak. Sawyer followed behind, kicking rocks, already spending imaginary money on upgrades. Not one of them asked how I felt about losing the only place that had ever truly felt like home. That day erased every remaining doubt. Their focus was no longer about preserving family history or honoring my grandparents' wishes. It had become completely about profit, turning memories into numbers on paper. My suspicion hardened into certainty. They viewed the inheritance as something shared by everyone, not as a personal gift left specifically to me. That shift changed my thinking completely. I moved from cautious observation to full awareness of their intentions. The drive from the cabin down to Knoxville felt longer than usual. Every curve in the road gave me more time to question everything. I had scheduled an appointment with Jonathan Rice weeks earlier, shortly after my birthday, but now that the day had arrived, nerves twisted in my stomach. His office was located in a quiet downtown building, away from the noise of the city. Grandfather had recommended him years ago for handling their legal affairs, always praising his direct and honest approach to estate matters. Jonathan greeted me calmly and motioned toward the chair across from his neatly organized desk. Together, we reviewed the documents he had already prepared: the irrevocable trust structure, funding schedules for the accounts, and deed transfers for the cabin and surrounding land. Everything only needed my final signature, now that I was officially 18. He carefully explained the protections again, how placing the assets into this kind of trust removed them from my personal estate and protected them against future claims while respecting my grandparents' intentions. Tennessee law fully allowed it at my age, so no guardianship was required. Then he leaned forward slightly, his tone steady but serious. "Are you prepared for the fallout? This could create confrontation, maybe even damage your relationship with your family if they fight back." The question stayed in the air. Memories flooded my mind despite my effort to stay focused. I thought about the rare good moments, Christmas when Sawyer was younger, and we decorated the tree together in Knoxville, while my parents laughed as he hung ornaments too high. I remembered the beach trip one summer when we stopped for ice cream and briefly felt like a normal family. Smaller memories surfaced too. My mother helping with a school project late at night. My father cheering during a recital I had almost forgotten about. Sawyer sharing headphones during a long drive while we sang old songs badly together. Those moments made the decision painful. Protecting the inheritance meant drawing a line they might never forgive. I imagined empty holidays, silent phones, and whatever fragile connection remained between us disappearing entirely. Jonathan waited patiently while I stared at the papers. "This isn't impulsive," he said gently. "You've clearly thought about it carefully. But it is permanent." I asked him to explain everything once more. How distributions would work if maintenance funds were needed, how taxes would change immediately, and what options existed if circumstances ever shifted drastically. He answered every question clearly and without pressure. The doubt reached its peak that afternoon. Driving back toward the mountains while fog rolled across the roads, I pulled over at an overlook and sat silently with the engine off. The quiet around me matched the fear of silence waiting at home if I followed through. What if they surprised me? What if the pressure really came from worry instead of greed? Losing what remained of my family felt almost like grieving them before they were gone. That night at the cabin, sleep never came. The fire burned low while I walked through the rooms my grandparents had once filled with life, touching familiar things. Grandfather's carved walking stick, grandmother's quilt folded across the sofa. Their trust in me pulled against my attachment to family ties. By morning, clarity finally arrived, not dramatically, but quietly and firmly. The recent visits, the financial calculations disguised as concern, Victor's constant urgency, all of it pointed in the same direction. Waiting any longer risked everything my grandparents had built slipping away through manipulation or false claims. The decision became simple: protect their legacy despite the pain it might cause. Growth sometimes demands difficult choices, even lonely ones. The next morning, back in Jonathan's office, my hand felt steadier than I expected as I signed the final documents. Relief came immediately. The security was locked in, but it mixed with sharp sadness over the relationships that might never recover. Jonathan shook my hand firmly. "This took courage," he said. "A lot of people hesitate forever." As I drove away from downtown Knoxville toward the foothills, the emotions settled together. Empowerment from finally acting and grief for the fractured relationships waiting ahead. Maturity had arrived not gently, but necessarily, shaped by that irreversible choice. The invitation to a family dinner came not long afterward. They suggested holding it at the cabin since, according to them, it was easier for everyone because I already spent most weekends there. I agreed immediately, curious how far their assumptions had already gone. Preparations kept me busy that day. I stocked the kitchen with steaks and fresh produce from the nearby market in Townsend and set the long oak table my grandparents had built decades earlier. The stone fireplace crackled early, warming the cabin as vehicles rolled up the gravel driveway one by one. Father arrived first, Mother carrying a bottle of wine and a store-bought pie. Sawyer followed with earbuds in and a duffel bag over his shoulder like he intended to stay overnight. Victor arrived last carrying a toolbox, casually mentioning he wanted to inspect a few things while he was there. Conversation began lightly over appetizers, the weather, Sawyer's upcoming football playoffs, neighborhood updates from Knoxville. Laughter moved around the table easily, while plates filled with grilled meat, roasted vegetables, and warm cornbread fresh from the oven. I waited until dessert when coffee steamed from mugs around the table before guiding the conversation where I wanted it to go. "Hypothetically," I said casually, pausing with my fork over the pie, "if this cabin suddenly didn't belong to any of us anymore, maybe it was donated to charity or something, what would everyone think?" Silence immediately filled the room. Sawyer shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Don't joke about that," he muttered sharply. "That's not funny." Victor recovered first, leaning forward with his practiced smile. "Well, hypothetically speaking, the smartest move would be selling quickly while prices are high before the market drops. Split everything evenly. No hard feelings." Father cleared his throat while glancing toward Mother. "It probably won't happen," he said carefully, "but liquidating it and investing the money would be practical." His tone stayed measured, though he avoided looking directly at me. Mother focused on refilling coffee cups. "We'd work out something fair," she added vaguely, her tight smile showing clear discomfort. That conversation shifted everything further. Soon, the discussion moved directly toward renovations and future upgrades. Victor began sketching ideas on a napkin, expanding the loft into extra bedrooms, adding a hot tub on the deck to increase rental value. Sawyer became excited immediately. "We could turn this into a full Airbnb setup," he said enthusiastically. "Tourists visiting the national park would love it. I could manage bookings and make serious money during busy seasons." Father nodded approvingly. "Smart use of the property. Upgrade the kitchen. Improve the Wi-Fi. The returns would cover the costs fast." Mother suggested brighter colors and a more open layout. Everyone talked as though decisions had already been made collectively. Nobody stopped to ask what I thought. The plans kept building on each other. estimated nightly rates, contractor connections, tax advantages Victor claimed to understand. I leaned back quietly, watching how naturally they spoke as though ownership already belonged to all of them. The assumptions in the room felt heavier than the wood smoke from the fireplace. Proceeds divided equally. Vacation schedules coordinated around family use. Victor excitedly described profit projections based on similar rental cabins nearby. Sawyer scrolled through photos of renovated properties on his phone, showing expensive listings, attracting premium rates. Father calculated annual profits aloud, while Mother discussed how the money could fully fund Sawyer's college or supplement retirement savings later. The evening revealed everything without a single argument. Their vision excluded me, except as someone expected to quietly agree while the property transformed into a business opportunity. Tension tightened inside me, but outwardly I stayed calm, refilling drinks and clearing dishes from the table. Internally, though, confirmation settled firmly into place. Their entitlement ran much deeper than I had first realized. These plans had already moved far beyond casual discussion. Later, while dishes stacked beside the sink, Victor clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Good thinking ahead," he said. "This will work out for everybody." The words sounded hollow. That night confirmed more clearly than any argument ever could why the trust had been necessary. Boundaries were no longer just legal protection. They had become essential for survival. At dawn, sunlight filtered through the pine trees when the rumbling started outside. A large moving truck slowly climbed the dirt road, followed by two familiar vehicles throwing dust behind them. My parents, Sawyer, and Victor stepped out almost together, smiling confidently while hired workers climbed from the truck. Sawyer waved a thick envelope proudly as he walked ahead of everyone else. "We got it done," he announced loudly across the clearing. "Signed and filed, everything's official now." Father immediately started directing the workers toward furniture visible through the windows. "Start with the heavy pieces first. The couch, the dining table. Be careful on the porch steps." Mother organized boxes she had brought, labeling them for different rooms as though the space already belonged to them. Victor supervised the truck ramp, joking casually with the movers about navigating mountain roads. Confidence radiated from all of them. Relaxed laughter, easy instructions, open conversations about loading order and storage units back in town. Sawyer proudly passed around documents, explaining how he had handled the notary process himself since turning 16, supposedly made certain paperwork easier. Guided by online forms and advice from my parents, they moved efficiently through the cabin, wrapping grandfather's rocking chair and stacking grandmother's quilts into plastic containers. Conversation filled the air. Discussions about storage, garage sales, and timelines for clearing the property. I stood quietly near the doorway, watching everything unfold without interruption. The workers carried out a bookshelf while Sawyer directed them confidently. Then suddenly, the entire group paused, their attention lifting toward the porch above them. Jonathan Rice stood there calmly in his suit beside a uniformed sheriff's deputy from Sevier County. Both held official folders, their expressions neutral but unmistakably serious. Jonathan walked slowly down the porch steps. "I need to speak with everyone here regarding this property." Father straightened immediately, his smile fading. "Who are you?" "Jonathan Rice, attorney representing the estate trust of Autumn Henderson. This is Deputy Harland responding to a reported attempted unlawful transfer." Sawyer tightened his grip on the envelope. "We have paperwork," he insisted quickly. "Everything is legal." Jonathan accepted the documents calmly and reviewed them with practiced precision. "These filings are invalid for multiple reasons," he said evenly. "Most importantly, they contain forged signatures and unauthorized notary stamps. There is no matching certification for the service used." Victor's face lost color. "There has to be some mistake," he muttered. "We followed the instructions carefully." Deputy Harland spoke next in a calm but firm tone. Attempting to transfer property ownership without consent from the legal owner, especially using fraudulent documents, qualifies as title fraud under Tennessee law. This is formal notice to stop immediately. Mother covered her mouth in shock. "We thought we were fixing things for the family." Father's posture collapsed slightly, the confidence gone from his voice. "Let's discuss this calmly. There's no need to involve officials." Jonathan remained steady. The cabin, acreage, and related financial accounts are secured within a legally executed irrevocable trust established weeks ago. Autumn is the sole trustee. Any further attempts to interfere could result in criminal charges. Attention shifted toward Sawyer, whose hands now shook while gripping the envelope. He had signed prominently as a co-owner transferee, believing the guidance from my parents made everything legitimate. His confidence broke instantly as reality settled in. "I only did what they told me," he said quietly. "I thought it was okay." Victor avoided eye contact, muttering excuses about misunderstandings. Mother instinctively reached towards Sawyer, but shock held her frozen in place. Father rubbed his temples, unable to find words. The moving crew exchanged uncomfortable glances before one worker quietly suggested pausing the job. Deputy Harland addressed them directly. "No loading today. Everything stops now." Silence covered the clearing, broken only by wind moving through the trees. Sawyer sank onto a nearby box with his head in his hands, suddenly looking far younger than before. Victor paced in short, anxious steps as his calculations visibly fell apart. My parents exchanged defeated looks, their certainty completely gone. Jonathan handed them copies of the trust summary and cease notices. "Any further attempts will escalate this matter." Jonathan calmly recommended they consult independent legal counsel. The deputy added, "We'll document this incident. Any repeated visits like this could result in trespassing charges." Without arguing further, they backed away. The moving crew climbed into the truck while my family returned to their vehicles and slowly drove back down the gravel road. Dust lingered in the air before finally settling, leaving the porch quiet except for Jonathan and the deputy reviewing final details with me. The situation affected Sawyer the most deeply. His involvement in signing the documents placed him directly in the center of the issue, turning his earlier confidence into visible uncertainty. The others carried quieter defeats. Victor's plans had collapsed completely, while my parents' justifications lost all credibility that morning. The entire situation stripped away every excuse and exposed the consequences in real time. The legal protections held exactly as intended, preventing their attempt from going any further. Not long after the incident, Jonathan filed a countersuit alleging attempted title fraud and intentional interference with inheritance rights under Tennessee law. The case moved steadily through Sevier County Court as discovery requests uncovered forged notary records, emails coordinating the plan, and even Sawyer's internet searches about quick property transfer forms. The evidence continued building, leaving little room for defense. My family hired separate attorneys, and legal expenses quickly piled up through depositions, filings, and court proceedings. Victor's situation deteriorated the fastest. Existing creditors moved in once news of the lawsuit spread, pushing him toward bankruptcy protection, while outstanding judgments still remained over him. The trial itself lasted only a few days. The judge ruled decisively in my favor, awarding compensatory damages to cover legal fees, along with additional punitive damages meant to discourage similar behavior in the future. By the time all expenses were calculated, the total financial burden placed on them exceeded 6 figures, adding pressure to finances that had already been strained. No appeals followed. Their resources had run out. Payments eventually came through garnishments and liens stretched across several months, slow but unavoidable. Afterward, all contact stopped completely. My number was blocked. Social media accounts became private or quietly unfollowed me. Holiday cards stopped arriving. Family group chats disappeared without explanation. Not a single message came afterward. No apologies. No accountability. No attempt to reconnect. The tension was replaced by silence, complete and permanent. Life at the cabin slowly settled into a rhythm I controlled entirely myself. Mornings often began in the garden my grandmother once cared for, turning soil enriched through years of compost while planting heirloom seeds she had stored carefully in labeled jars. Tomatoes, beans, and herbs grew steadily under my care, later becoming simple meals prepared fresh from the garden. Afternoons were usually spent on maintenance projects. I repaired the section of porch roof Grandfather had once patched temporarily, finding matching shingles from a supplier in Gatlinburg. Standing on the ladder beneath the mountain sun, I removed old weathered pieces and secured new ones carefully into place. Every hammer strike brought quiet satisfaction, preserving the structure with my own hands and continuing the work my grandparents started years earlier. Evenings became peaceful beside the fireplace. Flames moved across logs I had split myself, warmth spreading through rooms filled with familiar creaks and silence. Books from my grandparents' shelves became steady companions, while tea steamed quietly beside me late into the night. In that solitude, I discovered something important. I finally had space to process years of imbalance, grieve the relationships I had lost, and still embrace the independence I had chosen. Freedom felt real. The decisions were mine, the pace of life slowed, and the space around me reflected care given willingly instead of obligation. Eventually, Victor moved away, with rumors placing him somewhere farther south chasing construction work. My parents noticeably reduced their spending, and Sayer finished high school much quieter than before. The distance between all of us became both physical and emotional. Our lives moved in separate directions without crossing again. One crisp morning, I stood on the wide porch with coffee in hand, watching the mist rise slowly from the valley below. Pine trees swayed gently while birds called across the ridges, and morning light spread gold across the land now fully protected. The view represented everything earned through difficult decisions, peace rooted in certainty, and a sense of belonging that no longer felt threatened. What I learned from all of it reached far beyond any courtroom victory. Protecting what matters sometimes means letting go of people who don't value it the same way. Real family reveals itself through consistent actions, not simply through blood ties. Setting boundaries is not rejection. It is self-respect, and sometimes it creates room for healthier connections elsewhere. If you are facing similar pressure, inheritance conflicts, unequal family dynamics, or the weight of constant expectations, understand that standing firm can also lead you toward quiet strength, genuine independence, and a life built on your own terms.